So, starting a minute or two early, and for those of you who are saying, Brewer, get your schedule together. We don't know when you're coming on. I'm sorry. This is the first week that I've done YouTube Live, so I'm having some scheduling challenges here. Why am I doing this event? I'm doing a 5-day Prolon fast and wanted to share some of the results. There's some interesting stuff that I'm seeing. I've done fasting off and on for several years. It's just been over the past, 5 years that a lot of information regarding the health benefits of fasting has been appearing in the science literature. And again, I've got two reasons for doing this Prolon fast and sharing it. The reason I'm doing it personally is I gained a little bit of weight when I was doing some traveling with physician partners and needed to lose a little bit of weight. I've lost most of that already. I'm from a high of 162 this year down to about 153. I did most of that through a 2-day water fast each week. And for the most part, I'm very happy with the water fasting. I keep thinking I need to extend the days on those 2-day water fasts, and that's a challenge. The other thing is I also think that maybe a longer, slower burn that you get with a fasting mimicking diet for 5 days might have some benefit in terms of epigenetics. And if you have a question about what's epigenetics got to do with all this, let me know. That's an interesting conversation to have. But there's another reason that I'm doing this, and that is to share this experience and hopefully continue to increase awareness of fasting. As I've mentioned multiple times, I've got dozens of patients that have lost tons of weight, 30 to 50 pounds. And the pattern is pretty clear. Most of it includes two things. First, going on a low-carb diet to stop those ups and downs in glucose levels. And second, narrowing that window of eating. A lot of people call that intermittent fasting. Technically, it's not. It's a decreased or a narrowed window. Time-restricted eating is what it really is. Intermittent fasting is more like the 5 and 2 day fast that you see, where you eat your normal food for 5 days of the week, and then 2 days of the week you cut down to about 600 calories. Just briefly, what is Prolon? I've been covering that again this week. It's been well researched. It was developed not because it was supposed to be better. It is not better biologically than fasting itself. And in many ways, you have to question whether it's better than caloric restriction. But I'm not going to get into the caloric restriction conversation today. Fasting mimicking was developed to be an easy button for getting people into fasting. If you go back to those patients of mine that have lost a whole lot of weight, less than half a dozen have ever actually done extended fasting. And that's not good. Again, extended fasting does need to be a part of your lifestyle if you're focused on longevity and decreased disability. The research continues to pile up, and it's important. Now, I'm going to go ahead and share a few things about my own experience. Very interesting thing I just found out a few minutes ago. Before I get to that, in terms of my own experience, I'll give you a spoiler. I hit another significant spike, almost 200 again. I don't understand that. We'll get into that in just a minute. But before we do, a correction from yesterday. I was covering, or the day before, I was covering how the longevity researchers, when they look at this, they start with the easiest lab organism they can go with, and that's a yeast. Because biochemically, in terms of growth factors and inflammation, yeast has some of the same, actually many animals do. Rabbits, fruit flies, roundworms, and I mentioned S. cerevisiae. I called it Serratia cerevisiae is the yeast. I was wrong. I can't believe I don't remember it because it's Saccharomyces cerevisiae and it's Brewer's yeast. I should have remembered that. So thank you for your patience on that correction. One other thing to cover before we start, and that is, am I trying to sell my own Prolon? No, I have it if you're interested. But I also want to make it clear that I'm going to show you 7,400 in other places to get Prolon. One of them is the Prolon place itself. Just Google Prolon. The other is, again, there are 7,400 docs out there, healthcare providers that have it available. So I'm in retirement. I've got other sources of income. I'm more concerned that you go ahead and begin to understand and accept fasting as a positive, healthy lifestyle type of activity. Now, in addition to other ways of managing your diet and exercise. Now, I mentioned to you a minute ago that I had another spike. Here's what happened. Day one, there wasn't much that happened. I just started to slow down my, well, actually, I did have a couple of, let me show you the daily graph here. First of all, here's the graph for today. Another spike, and as you can see, again, almost up to 200. Here's the problem, and let me go ahead and share that with you. There was a comment, I think it was from Arcane Cortich, and he said, do you think that's right? Almost 200 off of a cup of mushroom soup? And here's the thing, I don't know if it's right. Now, why would I not know? I could and should do a finger stick. You should do that whenever you do get one of these. Well, I've got a long sleeve shirt on today. I can't show you that button, but this is continuous glucose monitoring. And he made the comment that you probably shouldn't, it's probably not accurate enough to make insulin decisions on. First of all, I don't take insulin, but even the manufacturer, Abbott, will say, no, this is not accurate. The continuous glucose monitor, Freestyle Libre, is not accurate enough to use for making an insulin decision. Clearly not. In fact, if you get a real high number, if you get a real low number, you should check it. And in fact, the machine itself will give you some statements about, hey, please check this. I'm not sure that I'm right. Now, so why didn't I do that then? Well, I did do it 2 other times. I did it yesterday. I did it today. Both times it was within, I did a finger stick, and it was within 2 points of the CGM. But I didn't do it either time during the big peak, the big spike. Now, why didn't I? Here's what, again, if you haven't used the CGM, you don't understand. It can be slippery. I thought this was not going to be an issue again. It happened 2 days ago. At that time, I didn't think it was going to be an issue. I didn't imagine that I needed to check my blood sugar within the next hour after having a cup of soup. Yesterday, I did get a spike, but it was not a big one. It was 2 little spikes for, the first one was the lunch cup of soup, and the second one was the dinner cup of soup. And I thought, you know what, the previous one, that big spike, was a red herring. It was probably a wrong number on the CGM. And I'm still very much wondering, is that a wrong number on the CGM? But silly me, I got focused. I was in a rush. I've got a lot of meetings going on today, and I didn't think to check again. So by the time I checked, as you can see, the spike was already over. I just checked to confirm that bottom number. And again, That bottom number looks like about what, 125 or so, and I got 124 on my finger stick. So again, you know what they say, every answer creates a whole bunch of new questions, and every solution creates a whole bunch of new problems. And unfortunately, yes, that's the issue. Now, interesting point and somewhat related to this issue of blood glucose. I don't know if you can see this, Keto Mojo. So I've been checking. I actually had lost my Keto Mojo. I found it yesterday. I checked my ketones yesterday and was not surprised to see no ketones. Today, I had positive ketones. In fact, just a minute before I started this thing, and as I was coming down from about 10 minutes ago before I started this video, and as I was coming down from a CGM spike, that big one that you see there. Now, isn't that interesting? Do I think that's entirely incorrect? Not necessarily. Here's the thing, you know, you're doing enough fasting, 600 calories a day for 4 or 5 days, and somebody like me that usually eats, what, between 3 and 4 times that amount, I am probably burning fat by this point. It certainly feels like it, I tell you. I didn't sleep well at all last night, and I'll cover that in a minute. So do you think it's really possible to have some trace ketones getting started at the same time you're coming down off of a glucose spike? Interesting enough, an interesting point, isn't it? But again, the bottom line is you're not going to burn fat without creating ketones. So speaking of sleep, here's one of the major problems. Very, very few people actually get into prolonged fasting because that just sounds ugly and hard. And the first few times you start missing a meal and your blood sugar starts doing this, especially if you don't have it leveled out on a low carb diet, it becomes hard. And when your blood sugar starts dropping, willpower becomes very difficult. I think it was it Bear Bryant that said, you know, fatigue makes, we can all be heroes until we're tired, and then fatigue makes cowards of us all. It was one of the big old-time football coaches. And the same thing happens with decreased blood sugar. So let me go over and talk for a few minutes about sleep. Those low blood sugar times are one time when it's challenging to continue a prolonged fasting area. The lack of sleep tends to do that as well. Now, I'm sleeping actually far better than I have in my whole life, especially since making some changes, again, mostly with the low carb, increased resistance training and interval training. I used to do mostly just long, slow distance, and that didn't help in terms of sleep at all. So this is day 4. So day 3, night 3, last night, I did sleep, but I woke up at 4:30. That's about 2 hours before I usually wake up, and I couldn't go back to sleep. I just laid there and meditated without moving around, but felt really, really bad today. Checked my blood sugar, and it was okay. But again, you know that feeling when you get up 2 hours early and you can't sleep. I was able to get a 10-minute nap about an hour ago, and actually that was huge. I feel a lot better now. So again, those are some of the components of the experience and some of the questions that the experience raises. I did mention one more thing before we start getting to questions. I did mention epigenetics, and that's a significant thing about what this is all about. What's epigenetics? Here's the thing. We've got what, 6 billion base pairs? Maybe it's 3 billion. Anyway, you got a whole lot of them. Here's the thing. How does the body go in and find the right base pairs on the right gene at the right time that they need a gene for insulin? or a gene for insulin-like growth factor, or a gene for any of these other mTOR, any of these other proteins that are hormones or again, enzymes that are used in the metabolic pathways that involve cardiovascular inflammation. Well, the same way that it accesses any other gene, it's called epigenetics. You may have heard of a thing called the methylome. The reason it's called the methylome is this: adding a methyl group to certain base pairs within the genetic chain, or within our genes, is a great way for the body to tabulate and store genes and know where they are when it needs to access them. It appears that, like me, after 62 years or 60 years of tending to eat like 4 or 5, 4 times a day, sometimes more, sometimes less, but not very often, your body loses a lot of the things that it needs to have active ability to find the genes that it needs to code for the right information. Now, how much of insulin resistance as we age is due to epigenetics? A lot of people think a lot of it is. How much of it's due to something else, like something impacting the cell wall and or something impacting the pancreas? We really don't know. You talk to 3 scientists, you can probably get 8 different theories. But there's no question that we've got the same genes at age 60 that we had at age 20. We get insulin resistance at age 60, but we didn't have it at age 20. What's going on? Again, the methylome and how our body finds and accesses the right genes at the right time does appear to have a major impact on this issue. So that's why lifestyle is so important. They say genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger, or not. So that's why lifestyle is so important. Don't consider genetics as a death sentence if you have bad ones. I've got some bad ones, but I just, you deal with it. Okay, so thank you again. I apologize for not scheduling. And again, I hope to get to a stable, like weekly YouTube Live program where it's predictable. But right now, I've just got too much stuff going on. We'll go to a few comments. Barry Davis, how will you decide when to stop Crestor and ACE inhibitors? Well, I continue to stay with as low a Crestor as possible with myself and my patients as well. When it's somebody that's new, if usually they've got some inflammation, that's why we're getting them started, or evidence of inflammation, we'll usually start with 5 milligrams per day. You may have seen on some of the comments, one viewer commented that his doc started him on 40 of rosuvastatin daily, and he had some muscle challenges, so they took him off. Well, dang, I've never had anybody on 40. For a couple of exceptions related to high LDL, I have had maybe 2 people on up as high as 20, but the vast majority of cases, and the go-to is 5 milligrams daily. And for most of those people, I'm able to get them to once or twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, and sometimes splitting the pill down to 2.5, 2 to 3 times a week. Why do that? Again, statins, most of the statins have 2 different properties. One has to do with lowering LDL, which may or may not be a good thing. In some people's cases, it is a good thing. But the other function of statins is to decrease cardiovascular inflammation. There's evidence that the most popular statins, like Lipitor, don't do that well. They still continue to drop LDL, but probably don't do as well in terms of decreasing cardiovascular inflammation. So that's why I don't use it, especially with diabetics and females. I don't think I've ever written a script for Lipitor. The 2 statins that I do use, when I do use statins right now, are rosuvastatin, or generic Crestor, and Livalo. Livalo is generic pitavastatin, and it's very new on the block, very expensive. You're starting to get some access to it in some Canadian pharmacies and some other places. I'm going to move on. Actually, one other comment. How about ACE inhibitors? I've had several patients, these patients that are losing 30 pounds, when they do that, their blood pressure often goes way down. As it does, we need to decrease their blood pressure related medications. And ACE inhibitors are blood pressure related medications. So if they don't have cardiovascular inflammation and they lose the weight and lose their high blood pressure, yes, we can take them off of ACE inhibitors as well. What happens more often is that these people already have cardiovascular inflammation, and you do want to keep them on a tiny bit of ACE inhibitor. You try to do that. And very few people that have had high blood pressure, lost 30 pounds, and drop their blood pressure, really drop it so low that they're symptomatic, and you can't have them on even a low dose. Okay, John Tocho, time restricted versus 2-day water fast versus Prolon, question mark. My answer would be yes, depending on your situation and what you want to do. Again, all of the major original research on fasting has been done with water fasting, and again, in caloric restriction, which I won't get into today. Prolon was really developed originally to be more of an easy button. For example, people with cancer. It's been shown that cancer is a major improvement in terms of not only the body's ability to beat cancer, it helps damage cancer, but it also helps the body fight or keep from having problems with side effects from chemo. So Walter Lange, the developer of fasting mimicking diet and Prolon, was a researcher in this area. He would try to encourage cancer patients and their docs and their oncologists to do fasting. And you know what the reaction there is. Look, my patient has cancer. I'm getting ready to use chemo and/or radiation, and you want me to starve them? So that was what led to the development of more of an easy button. That and the fact that he was a mentee. His mentor was Roy Walford, who was the godfather of caloric restriction. Now, since I've mentioned it 3 or 4 times, I just have to make 2 comments about caloric restriction. On the one hand, it's not as bad as a lot of people would say. Like Jason Fung says it's terrible. And his point behind it is that it slows the metabolism. He's making an assumption that you want to have high body metabolism, and that's healthier. That's more fun for people that like to eat, but not necessarily healthier. If you look at the real science, lower metabolic rates are better for longevity and health. I've probably gone on maybe too long on that issue. John Dieters, I'm on day 4 of my custom FMD. Hey, good for you, John. Today, after a strong Pilates workout, and you're also working out too. Very good. Well, maybe not very, maybe a little bit, taking a few risks. I was a little lightheaded afterwards. Okay, well, there you go. Checked blood pressure and glucose. Blood pressure was low peak at 95/60 with 85 glucose. Well, be careful. My question, John, if you're still there, was it one of these low carb FMDs? Because that's what I'm really more interested in. And I think I have to, with my experience with this round of Prolon, I'm really thinking, it's very, I do like the idea of more of an extended fast. And besides, for the most part, I'll continue to do my 2-day water fast. I will, I do think that these extended fasts are good. I'm personally just not ready to take hold of a 5 or 7 day water fast. But I am okay with the fasting mimicking, but I'm showing this again. I don't like having those spikes. I don't think they're dangerous. I just don't like having them. And here's another thing about Prolon is the fasting mimicking, or the fasting mimicking diet that Longo developed. It's not low carbs. And for those of us who have insulin resistance and or diabetes, there's some things that you have to consider, some pros and some cons. The pros are, number one, you're probably dropping weight unless you need to. You don't need to lose weight. You tend not to. Number two, there's incontrovertible science which would indicate that yes, it does help for insulin resistance, and I think most of that probably is related to weight loss. That's just my own personal guess. But again, it's not low carb, and if you've got somebody that's used to low carb and keeping their blood sugars very stable, then it's not, you'd rather be able to do that with a low carb FMD. If you look at my other daily numbers, I tend to stay, sorry, it's moving around. I tend to stay within a pretty good range and actually low. Those red numbers that you're seeing there are red because they drop below 80, which is what I have said is the lower limit. And that's what typically happens with me. That's one thing that these CGMs help you do, is see what your daily pattern tends to be. And most of us tend to drop our blood sugar between midnight and about 5 o'clock when cortisol starts going back up. Lucian P, just for a long walk, 1 to 2 hours can burn 500 or more calories. Absolutely. That's another thing that you begin to realize when you start using CGM. And that is, I can do something like go out and take a vacation, a carb vacation, have a beer, have some pizza or something with my kids. And instead of having that spike, I can go in and go take a walk and take the top right off of that spike. David Jones, really surprised you showed ketones with glucose. Yeah, isn't that interesting? With glucose that high. Maybe they linger after the changeover to glucose. Now I'm curious how my body responds. See, David, you're exactly right. Very good point. I appreciate you mentioning that. That's clearly what I suspect, that as I continue to, over this 5-day pattern, go without basal metabolic fuel, I have to burn fat. Therefore, I have to be generating ketones. Now, part of the question is, how quickly does your body clear ketones? And I don't know the answer to that. I would love to hear or see it if somebody does. I mean, you guys are sitting at your computer and maybe you can Google it real quick. Barry Davis, how will you personally decide to stop statins for yourself? Much improved CIMT or other blood markers? Barry, I've done 3 videos on stopping statins. Just Google Ford Brewer stopping statins. In fact, I think it was 4. Plenty of people have done research in this area because guess what? The world is full of statin haters. And I understand why, and I would agree that the vast majority of, well, I won't say that. At least over half, I won't say that either. A huge portion of statin prescriptions may do more harm than good. So people want to get off of them. You got to remember, statins were given for a reason. And for example, with me, I have insulin resistance. I'm 62 years old. I have insulin resistance. If I stop statins, and as you can see here, it's not like, I mean, you can say this is not a great, this has got a lot of errors, but I will also say, I can also rely on the fact that I get a little cortisol bump, or if I don't walk the narrow path in terms of managing carbs all the time, I'm going to start getting some glucose spikes. It's not like I've got a whole lot more weight to lose. I don't. So I don't see me getting off of at least low dose statins. I know, Barry, and again, I appreciate you putting that out there and giving me a chance to go ahead and respond to it. Guys, I've got lots of great comments continuing here. I apologize, but like I said before, I've got a lot of things going on in terms of my schedule. I did want to get information out each day. Let me just handle a couple of more quick comments. Lucian P, LISS, low intensity steady state is great for fat burning while fasting. Lucian, I'd love to hear what that means. Oh, what you're saying is just a long walk for 1 or 2 hours. Yeah, a long walk for 1 or 2 hours is very, very healthy. Cree, latest on metformin and statins. I mean, fasting. I will tell you this. I did continue my own metformin. I'm on 500 twice a day. I continued it for the first 3 days. I didn't take any metformin today, and I won't take it tomorrow either. Now, I'm not going to get much deeper on that. Some people, again, it's something that you need to go over individually and with your doc if you're going to do this. Okay, how are you? Ken Patu regarding Warburg effect, fasting and ketosis. I usually hear of this in terms of starving cancer cells, but is ketosis and reduced blood glucose efficacious for benign tumors as well? Well, if you think about it, a non-benign cancerous tumor, the definition basically is tissue that's out of control with growth and activity. A benign tumor is something that grew a little bit, but then stopped. What makes the Warburg effect and chemotherapy and radiation and all the treatments that we have for cancers work is that they attack the weak spot for the cancer, and that is its growth out of control. So if you can take its fuel away, like you do with these dietary manipulations, or hit some of its genetics and some of its specific growth activities with radiation or chemo, then you can hit those cancers. So, I mean, I don't know. I haven't really seen the question of will it stop benign tumor growth, but I'm a little bit skeptical just for the reasons that I brought up. Barry Davis, do you follow the fasting fat man? He's lost 200 pounds since January on a water fast and still going. I've heard of him. I haven't looked him up. Again, thank you very much for your interest. And I got to sign out. I got to go. Thanks.